Hello everyone, it's Brett here, Lionheart84, and just having a quick discussion today, mostly with myself and anybody who decides to watch, about the compost on my new Fingerlime that I got a week or so back, and what I'm going to do about the root system on it. Now obviously the plant's in very good health at the moment, it's only just come from the nursery, but I've noticed when I'm trying to lift it that, metaphorically speaking, the pot weighs an absolute ton. I mean, the plant's half the size of my grapefruit and the pot's half the size, and yet it weighs the same or more than my grapefruit weighs after repotting. So I'm going to have I'm just about to have a little investigation and dig around on this, and what I've discovered, I'm just going to pull some of this soil out. It's got this lovely peaty, open, what you take to be nice, free draining, lightweight soil on top. And what I've found when I dig down a little bit is that the original root ball, I won't necessarily be able to see it, but the actual root ball down here is a really heavy, clayey garden, what I'd call a normal garden compost. And this is typical, I found, of citrus trees growing in parts of Europe, that they come with this very hard compost. And what looks to me, what I would say has happened here, I would say that Lubera have brought these plants in. You probably can't see very easily, but if I show you, this is what's come out of the top of the pot, which is this nice, light, fibrous, organic sort of peaty size compost, which is not dissimilar to my mix that I've got here. But what's lower down in the pot is what I would describe as a clay based muddy soil. So I would say that Lubera have bought these. I mean, look at this, look, straight out of a garden as far as I'm concerned. Great big rocks in it. Clearly Lubera buy these in as smaller plants in smaller pots, and then they immediately up-pot them into this slightly bigger pot with all this new soil. But in actual fact there are no roots whatsoever, no feeder roots in the top part of the soil. The roots start here, which is clearly where the original stem surface, and they've simply potted them into a bigger pot, which allows them to sell the plant for more money. However, this soil that is here is dreadful, and when I lift it, I can barely lift the pot with one hand. So I can imagine that in no time at all, especially in this country, that I'm going to end up with a plant that's suffering root issues, just as most of my other citrus have done. So in the case of this plant, I'm going to preempt those problems by taking the plant out of the pot today and removing as much as I can of that sort of muddy, clayey soil. The plant's not growing at the moment, so I don't think it's going to set it back much. And I'm also going to raise it slightly in the pot, because as far as I can see, it looks like not issues with the trunk here, but certainly some distortion of the trunk here. What I think I'll probably do is try and repot it in. I think I can use the same size pot, to be honest, without any problem at all, because what I don't want to do is overpot it. But I'm going to replace as much of that heavy, not nice soil as I possibly can, and get it into a better compost, and hope that I better keep this plant in better health than some of my other citrus where I've had root issues. So we'll come back to it when I've removed it from the pot. Right, so now I've taken it out of this soil, out of the pot rather. I think you can probably see that this has got one of those typical hard, muddy, compacted soils that I've been getting in a lot of citrus recently. It's very hard, it's hard to break it up, there's no root growth hardly coming out of it. It's probably what they would grow in their natural habitat in the soil in France or Spain, but it's not, which is fine if they're in ground, but it's not ideal for growing them in this kind of soil in pots in a cooler climate where they tend to get a lot more water, like here in the UK. So what I've decided I'm going to do is get as much of this old muddy compacted compost off. I mean, it's really hard, so one of the roots can grow through it at all. That's probably why it hasn't got a particularly amazing looking root system. I can't even get this off. So what I'm probably going to do is try and tease off most of the soil, and I might end up putting the plant in a bucket of warm water, as I have done with several other plants, to get as much of this old soil off as possible, so that I can get it into a fresh new free draining citrusy type mix that I use, which I hope will encourage the plant to grow rather than suffer root rot and die off. So we'll be back with you in a minute once I've got most of the soil off the roots. As you can probably appreciate, this was a very expensive plant, so I don't want to be carrying out treatment like this unnecessarily, but I feel it's necessary. So I've got a bucket of, this is basically just lukewarm or tepid water here. You can probably see how dry the centre of the root ball was by the amount of air coming out, but I don't think the water could even penetrate it, it was so muddy. So what I'm going to do is, this won't do the plants any appreciable harm at all, sitting in warm or tepid water for, what I'll probably have to do is leave it for an hour or so, because I want all the soil to soften up and loosen, and I'll be able to remove, hopefully, most of it from the root balls. I'm just going to I'm going to leave that now, in the case of this one, to soak for a long time and see if I can get nearly all that soil off. Now, the advantage of leaving it to soak in the bucket is if the roots were dehydrated, as they may well have been, because the water probably couldn't penetrate the soil, it's just heavy because of the type of soil it is, it will give the roots a good opportunity to draw up plenty of water into the plant, so the shock will be an absolute minimum. So we'll come back to this after I've probably have some lunch and do some other things in the garden. I'll probably come back to it after an hour or so and see if we can get the rest of the soil off, and then I can show you a short video of that part as well before we repot it. So I'll catch up with you in the next part of the video. Now, just to prove how ridiculous some soils are and the fact that this has been growing in common or garden soil, I've just fished this rock out the middle of the root ball, which probably goes some way to explaining the weight of the soil if a load of it has got stones in it like that. But I mean, that stone is huge and it weighs a lot. Like, it's the weight of a cricket ball. For anybody who knows what cricket balls are, obviously won't in America, I would think it's heavier than a baseball. But that was in the middle, plumb in the middle of the root ball. This is very clearly muddy garden soil, so these must be growing in probably somewhere in the Mediterranean before Lubera gets them. I would say they're growing in the Mediterranean, actually quite possibly in ground, or at least if not in ground, then they must grow them in pots where they simply take the soil from the ground. Now, these does appear to be some clay floating on the surface. I would say these are clay granules. Now, I don't know if they're meant to improve the drainage or hold moisture, because obviously expanded clay granules will hold moisture. Now, they are light, so they're not the problem, but the problem is obviously this very heavy soil. But it's been in here for about half an hour now, so gradually I'm getting all this surplus heavy stuff off, and I'm going to be left with a nice clean root ball, I hope. But so I'm going to leave these in here, roots in here, so for at least an hour, so they should soak up and absorb plenty of moisture, so the plant shouldn't be suffering from any dehydration. I'm hoping that I won't do any harm, but having large rocks like that and the soil serves no purpose at all except weighing the plants down in a storm. So I'll come back to you in the next stage of the video. So after removing all the soil from the roots, this pile of thick mud is what I've been left with, and if we go back to the plant, this is what I've actually got down to now. Still some clay granules in there, but most of the old muddy soil is now gone, and I'm pleased to say the roots look fairly healthier, but they've obviously been restricted from growing. So what I'm going to do now is put this back in the same pot it came in, which is this one here, which has obviously now got loads of room in it. So we'll get this potted up and well watered, and hopefully not have any further issues with it, but we'll try and see. So I'll come back to you in a minute. Now my only concern I've got now is, obviously I've now finished repotting the plant. My only concern I've got now is the root system obviously is not well established in the pot. The pot itself now weighs roughly half what it weighs before, which is absolutely incredible, but of course it hasn't now got the weight to keep the standard way down. So what I was planning, first thing I'm going to do is just put some water in here, because what I want to do is see how quickly the water drains through the pot. Let's see how long it takes that water to drain through compared to what was in there before. So I'm going to give it a bit more water in a minute. What I'm curious to see is how long. Ideally you want the water to start draining out the bottom within a minute, but of course I might have to put more water in for it to soak out anyway. But it will give some indication of whether or not the soil is better draining. Obviously the water I've put in there is probably going to be soaked up by the soil as it runs through, because the soil that I've put in is very absorbent, will hold some moisture. But in an ideal world you want to see the water coming out the bottom fairly quickly. Let's get some more water in it to get it up to make sure that it's got plenty in there. Now the idea of doing this is obviously it should help. I hope it's going to get the water to settle back. It's going to wash the compost into the roots where I've removed all the soil, and it should make the plant more steady, but I'm also hoping this water will weigh the pot down. Okay, that's good. You can probably see that the water's already coming out the bottom of the pot, which is, yeah, look, it's absolutely pouring through the bottom of the pot. That's exactly what I want it to do. It's not being held in the pot, so that soil's draining really quickly as I wanted it to. Excellent. And I'm going to put this back in a shelter position on my deck in the hope that will won't get knocked over in the wind or rocked in the pot. If I find there's a problem with it being rocked in the pot, because obviously it's being very top heavy, being a standard, then I'll have to probably I might have to put 3 canes around the edge of the pot and make up some kind of system to support the plant until the roots stabilise. But I'm hoping that the roots will grow away nice and quickly with that nice fresh compost in there. The only downside is it's going to be the weather getting cold now that we're heading in September, but I think you can see that you'll probably agree the drainage on that pot is more than adequate. It's come out very, very quickly, so hopefully we'll see some improvement in the health of this plant. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll much appreciate it if you'll give the video a thumbs up, share it with anyone you think might be interested in citrus or finger limes. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, and of course if you hit the bell you will be notified of new videos as they come out. Catch up with you all soon. Brett out for now.